My name is Mary Schiller, and I am an author and a coach. And I have been around the three principles as I'm recording this now for nearly 3 years. So that was in 2014 that I came across the three principles. And prior to that, the quality of my life, I would have to say, was pretty poor overall. On the surface, things looked fine. You know, I was married, I have a daughter, I was working, I had, gone to graduate school a couple of different times, and, I'd been fairly successful in the career path that I was in. But underneath all of that, I was pretty unhappy. I had a very I don't even have a strong enough word, disastrous first marriage. I got married the first time when I was 22 to someone who turned out to be incredibly abusive and violent. I had no clue about that before we got married, and it literally materialized about 4 hours after we said I do. And I kind of went into a state of shock and self-preservation mode for a long time. I managed to escape that marriage with my life, and it really was an escape. I left about 7 years later, and by that point, things had escalated quite a bit. And I also had a daughter who was 2, and I needed to get her out of there. So I managed to escape the marriage. Unfortunately, a lot of the abuse continued for about another 12 years through the court system and through all kinds of other ways that he came up with to try to make our lives very difficult. And as a result of all of that, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder at age 29, I guess, right after I left the marriage. And I had actually been seeing a lot of different mental health professionals even while I was married, because I knew something was wrong in the marriage, but believe it or not, I didn't really understand what was going on. It was not obvious to me at the time. And I continued to seek different kinds of treatment over the years, and nothing was really very helpful to me at all. I did manage to get remarried, but my my traumatic thinking and my anxiety and all of that really wreaked a lot of havoc on my new marriage as well. We're still together. We're about to celebrate 20 years. But it was not easy. And I try to explain this to people in this way, that there was a constant feeling of anger and jealousy underneath every single aspect of my life. I was angry that somebody had chosen to harm me in this way and that I couldn't do anything about it. It was a done deal, is how it looked to me. And I was also just jealous of other people who hadn't had something like that happen to them. And I really felt like my life had been stolen from me at age 22, and that there was nothing I could do to get it back because I couldn't rewind time and undo all of that. So it looked absolutely permanent. And I say this because I know, a lot of people hear about post-traumatic stress disorder, and I don't think they really get what that looks like to people. It looks like something happened that really wasn't in your control, and that thing is now affecting you forever, and you can't fix it because you can't go back in a time machine and undo it. So in 2014, I had completed what seemed like the most likely path to wellness, which was a very intense and lengthy process with a specialized psychotherapist. And it had been about a year since I finished it in 2013. And so about a year later, 2014, I was starting to feel anxious and horrible again. I had about 12 months of feeling good. And then everything just started tanking like really quickly. And I was so mad. I was like, okay, I just went through this whole big long thing with this woman who, by all accounts, was a really good therapist and really caring. And here I am back in the same place that I was. And I was really mad. I was like, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to accept that my life is awful and make the best of it, and just kind of continue going through the motions of a happy life and having moments of happiness for sure, but not really feeling what I thought a human being should feel, and being alive. And then I ran across the three principles in what seems like a very random way. I was watching a video of someone online who was talking about a book, Michael Neal's Inside Out Revolution. And she was very enthusiastic about this book. And so I thought, well, what else? I've tried everything else, so I might as well read yet another book and try yet another technique, is how it looked to me. And I actually listened to the book and heard something in there. And it was really different from other things that I had heard over the years, from any of the other sort of self-help things that I had tried, as well as the more traditional therapy. And the first thing that I heard after listening to the book 2 or 3 times was that there actually wasn't anything wrong with me. Now, to say that that was a big moment would be putting it mildly. I had lived with this diagnosis. By that point, I was like 52 or something. I'd lived with that mental illness diagnosis all that time. And to realize that the only thing that was going on was that I was listening to some weird thinking. And I had the option to just ignore it and not even worry about it. It was like, what? Why didn't somebody tell me this before? And it was such a simple realization. And that, plus the news, if you will, that my ex-husband hadn't actually done anything to me. Stuff had happened. I wasn't like going into denial or something about, incidents that had occurred. But I saw very clearly that he hadn't done anything to me as a human being, because I'm not contained within this body or even this mind. I don't even know how to describe that, but we're bigger than that. And I didn't have to worry about any of the stuff that had happened. And it started to really transform the way I saw my first husband and everything that had occurred. And this was all very quick, I might add. This was probably over the span of about a month where I started to really kind of, I don't know, I felt like my vision had opened up to the whole horizon all of a sudden. Whereas before I'd been very tunnel vision in the way I was seeing things. And it was amazing how quickly I started to feel better without actually doing anything. No more techniques to manage the way I was feeling. No more anything. I stopped doing everything. I'm not going to say what other people should do, but for me, it was helpful to stop any of the techniques that I'd been doing to try to manage my PTSD symptoms, and the symptoms just faded away on their own. So it felt like somebody had waved a magic wand over me and just straightened me out.
So what did you hear when you first listened to the Inside Out Revolution by Michael Neal, Mary?
I think I was listening from the perspective that I had had all the years leading up to that. I was listening on the first go around from the perspective of, people get mental illness and they get treatment, but they can't really get over it. They just have to learn how to cope with it. And I was also listening from the perspective of I have to do things to manage my own mind and my own thinking. I have to change the way I look at things, or I have to think positively. So I was coming at it from that whole side. But when I listened to it that first time, I remember having this sense of, he's saying something different from that, but I'm not exactly sure what it is. So maybe I better listen again. And it took me literally probably 4 or 5 listens, I starting it over to really get that he was saying exactly the opposite of all of the things that I had heard before that.
So did you notice any changes before you became aware of an intellectual understanding?
I definitely had a different, and this is going to sound kind of cliche, but I had a different feeling. That was the first thing that I remember noticing. And I was insatiably curious to understand what he was trying to convey. So I was really into it. I was really focused. And even like I was commuting to work on the subway in New York and listening to the book. And all day long while I was at work, I was kind of looking at things from this new angle and trying to see if I could get it, you know? So, yeah, so I was definitely having a different experience of things. I was looking at people from a different perspective and looking at myself from a different perspective. And then I think there was one point in the book where, you know, Michael basically says you can give yourself a break from your thinking. So I would try that. I would just go, okay, you know, if I have thoughts about whatever stressful thing, I'll just set those off to the side and see what happens. So yeah, I did start to have a different experience pretty quickly. I felt like I was connecting with something. I don't really have a more definite way of putting that. I felt like I was, maybe just thinking about it plainly, that I was hearing the truth, that someone was finally telling me the truth. And there was no question. I didn't even stop. This is the weird part, because I'm not skeptical, but I'm fairly analytical. And I didn't even question it. Like, it was so obviously true. You know, it was as true as that I'm sitting here talking to you right now. It was that obvious and plain to me. It was almost like, okay, this has been staring at me all this time and I just didn't see it because nobody pointed it out. And I think, you know, having seen so many mental health professionals over the years who viewed me as someone with a problem, who saw me as, you know, somebody with essentially an incurable mental condition, that's how I had been accustomed to seeing myself. And this was the first time that I didn't do that. And that really flipped things around.
What specific changes did you notice in your life when you started to understand the principles?
Not a lot circumstantially changed right away. I was having a much different experience of my daily life, meaning I didn't have nearly as much stress, and I found that I wasn't bothered by nearly as much. You know, things didn't really affect me in the same way. I could have a feeling of anxiety or something like I would have had in the past, and I wasn't worried about it, so it would fade away really quickly. It wasn't until maybe a year or so into it that my circumstances of my life started to change. And maybe another year, so maybe 2 years into it, where they really started to make some big shifts. And I think it was just because I started to really, really get that there wasn't anything that I needed to do to fix myself. That took a while to sink in. And I think I finally saw that in early 2016. So a year and a half, 2 years into it. And I realized, okay, so everything's good. Like, there's nothing for me to fix or change here. So now what do I actually want to be doing with my life? And so that has brought some circumstantial changes, that piece of the realization for me.
So, what were the bigger changes you noticed over the longer term?
I abandoned my previous career almost entirely and decided that I really wanted to do something related to the three principles and make it my professional focus. So I did that. I wrote and self-published in the last year 7 books related to the principles. They're short books, but still 7 of them. I've got another one coming out shortly. So I'm going to just keep doing that because it's fun and it impacts a lot of people. And I became a coach, 3 principles coach. And I've been able to meet and interact with a lot of the people in this community, which has been really, really fun. My husband and I made a move that we've been wanting to make for 20 years. We moved from the States over here to Paris, France, which was like, what? Like, how did we manage to do that? And it all actually came together fairly easily, a lot more so than I thought it would be. And so now our daughter lives in the United Kingdom, so now we're able to be closer to her. That was one of the main reasons that we wanted to move. And so, a lot of things happened once I really, really saw that there was nothing for me to do about myself. It was almost like, okay, I just cleared about, 23 hours of work out of my day because I'm not working on myself anymore. So now I got all that time back. What do I want to do with it? And I think honestly that that's what's helped me to make such good progress so quickly on all of these things.
How do you see the impact on the world of more people having this understanding?
One focus for me has been on stress since I had post-traumatic stress disorder. And the one of the books that I've written that has been far and away the biggest seller deals with stress. It's called Mind Yoga. And I really have seen that when people's chronic stress starts to fade into the background, that their true self emerges. Their innate creativity starts to come to the surface a lot more. They start to get a lot more new ideas for how to change things, just the way I did, sort of the way I described. They realize they have sort of a natural springboard that they can do anything from. And I really feel like the simple fact of where stress is coming from. For me, I saw that it was just me listening to thought. That's all it was. That if people could see that, and if their stress could start to fade away, or at least fade into the background, they would really be able to access all of the resources they have as human beings to fix all kinds of problems we've got going on in this world. So that to me is a big piece of it, is helping people to realize who they are and what they actually are capable of doing, and not in a way that's so filled with effort like I thought it was before. It's actually a whole lot easier to do things and to act and be inspired and take action from that inspiration than I thought it was in the past. I'm hopeful that in my lifetime we will see a shift, some sort of paradigm shift. I feel like things are moving in that direction, and that somehow we're going to get a bigger platform. Either we'll create it ourselves, or someone who has a big platform will allow us to share it with them so that we can have a bigger reach. Because to me, that's the only thing that's missing at this point, is just reaching more people with this, because there hasn't been a person that I have worked with over the past year or so who doesn't get this pretty quickly. Because like I said before, they're hearing truth. When truth is being presented to you, it's obviously true. And so like I said, I'm very, very hopeful that all we really need is more reach, and things will start to shift.
Why do you think it's important to have more books about this understanding?
I'm a big proponent of the books because they're inexpensive, and that means that a lot of people can access this. That's how I came across it. So I understand the power of books to make an impact. And so, yeah, I'm really encouraging of people to write their own book and self-publish it like I have, because the more that's out there, the more that people are likely to run across it.
Yeah.
And really, my whole aim is I don't want to see people suffering the way that I did. I want to do what I can to stop that, and not just about PTSD, but any other kind of suffering that people are enduring. It's not. I was having a conversation a while back with a friend of mine, and she was saying, well, suffering and stress are kind of like badges of honor in our society a lot of times. And I said, yeah, but they're not helping. They're not helping anyone. And so, I would love for people to see that stress and suffering are not necessarily part of the human condition in the way that we believe them to be. In my view, what's happened for me is that I have been able to kind of relax into myself. And from there, I've been able to do a lot more. I know that there are a lot of people who do wear their stressful lives as a badge of honor, and it seems to be like the thing to do these days. Oh, I'm so busy. Oh, I've got too much to do, But you'd be amazed at what you can actually accomplish when that kind of thinking fades away. And you realize, like I said a moment ago, you have a lot of time available to you, and you can accomplish a lot more. It's really like a natural productivity booster. Like, I was always a productive person before the principles. That was one of the things that people had noticed about me. But since then, it's kind of gone crazy. Like, I've really been able to produce and create a lot more than I ever have, just because my mind isn't occupied with all of these, worrying about the state of my mental health, or all of that concern has just faded away. The truth is that everyone is capable of everything. I've really come to see that if you are inspired to do something, even if it seems impossible, the fact that you are inspired to do it means it's possible for you. You have what you need to do it, whether that means you have it intrinsically within yourself, or you'll be able to find the people to help you to do it. And so once you kind of see that, plus you don't have all this layer of stressful thinking or worry, it's just like you're just ready to go. There's nothing in your way anymore. There never was anyway, but now you can really see that there's nothing there. That inspiration is a reflection of who we actually are. And I have a completely random way of looking at this, which seems true to me. So I'll leave you to judge. So it looks to me like that inspiration is there for a very significant purpose, in a couple of ways. One way is it is an avenue by which we can experience our true self. So it's the way that mind, if you want to use the three principles term, is giving me a way to connect more fully to who I am. So if I'm inspired to write these books, that's a way that I'm able to really feel more of who I am on one side. And the other side is equally as important, which to me, this is so key, is it's also my way of allowing other people to experience it. So whatever is coming through me is going towards other people and is helping them connect to their true self. So I no longer see inspiration as optional to follow. It seems almost like a direct order to me, you know? not something to be dismissed as frivolous or dreamy or anything like that. It's like, what is my reason for being? My reason for being is to listen to what's being said to me and follow it. What else is there? Because that means that I'm listening to truth rather than listening to all this fuzzy, staticky thinking that doesn't mean anything. It feels different, right? It has a different sense to it. And that's where I want to be focusing myself and listening to and listening from, more of the time at least. My big focus right now really is on helping people listen to inspiration and act on it. And that those two pieces, it's fine to be able to hear it, but then you also have to be willing to act, even when what you're inspired to do sounds kind of kooky or sounds really out there. But that's the joy of having a new idea and following where it goes. So to me, the two things go hand in hand, both listening for it and learning what it sounds like, because you're right, we do have a tendency to kind of tamp it down, and then being willing to take an action even if it seems way out of the norm. Because I just kind of came up with this idea the other day that makes sense to me, where, when we allow ourselves to do that, every single time we're stepping into a new reality for ourselves. That's what I saw way back in 2014. I opened up to a whole new reality. I kind of woke up one day and felt like I was in a new world. And I feel like the same is true when we listen to what's calling to us and we take action on it. We literally step into a new reality that's way more exciting and interesting than the one we thought was pretty good. So it's kind of like a gateway every single time we do that.
What would you say to anyone who's worried about other people disapproving of their work?
Fear is thought. It's no better or worse than any other kind of thought. And unless I'm about ready to get hit by a scooter here in Paris, it's not telling me anything useful. So just like any other thought, I'm free to ignore it because it isn't telling me the truth. The truth is not there. The truth is someplace else that we're all aware of. And, I can't really control anything in this life anyway. And I certainly can't control my own thinking, let alone other people's thinking about what I do. So since that's a given, then you might as well do what you want. Because what choice do you really have, And asked that many times, like, what made you think you could just go write your first 3 principles book, even though you hadn't had any training, and I was like, I don't know, I just wanted to. And so I did. I thought it might be helpful to people. It didn't even enter my mind, honestly, that other people might object to it. And yeah, so that was a good example to me of how you can ignore that kind of thinking, and it doesn't have to have any impact on what you do or don't do. I'm sure that if I went back and read my books from a year ago, I might disagree with things that I have in there, but that's why I keep writing them, because I see things differently and I keep seeing things differently. And it's no concern of mine if somebody gives me a 1-star review on Amazon. If somebody's reading the book and took the time to write that 1-star review, well, maybe it'll help them next year. I don't know. So yeah, I don't give that any time or space. I also have no issue with any way at all that people want to share these principles. If they want to do that by teaching people how to have a successful garden, they can do that. If they want to do that by teaching people how to water ski, that's cool too. It makes no difference. If people are coming from this place of understanding, that will emerge no matter what they're actually talking about. And I often find that the less I talk about the principles, the more people seem to get. So, because like you kind of were alluding to earlier, you can get into this sort of analytical, intellectual space, and that's not where it is.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I would just say that if you're just learning about what this is, don't feel like you're not getting it, because you actually are. You can't not get this, because it's the truth about what you're actually experiencing. It's the truth of who you are. So if you feel like you're not getting it, you're allowed to set that aside too, and just realize that you already have this. So there's nothing for you to go out and get and try to understand. And even if it feels like an intellectual understanding that's not going to go any further, it doesn't even matter, because the principles, or what the principles are trying to describe, is the truth. And the truth is there, period. So even in those times when I forget, it's still there. It's not gone anywhere. So I find that very helpful to remind myself of occasionally. Like, even on days when things really don't look like this to me, I know that they actually are. And I find that quite useful.
So, Mary, thank you so much for doing this interview. How can people now get in touch with you or find out more about your work?
So my books are on Amazon exclusively. Some are both in Kindle and paperback form, and some are just Kindle. But you don't need a Kindle to read them. You can just use one of their nice free apps. And my website is just my name, maryschiller.com.
Thanks again, Mary. This has been a really great interview. You've been a great inspiration to me over the last couple of years, and I'm sure this will have inspired a lot more people too. Thanks again.